When the average fan of Thomas and Friends, or even a casual viewer, thinks about the show's catalog of villain characters, I'd wager they're likely to think about characters like Diesel, Diesel 10, D261, George, Spencer, hell, even some book characters like D199. They probably do not think about Vinny, and that's kind of fair given that he was a pretty terrible villain. Introduced in the 2016 Thomas and Friends film The Great Race, Vinny served as the secondary, or I guess just other villain of the film, depending on how you look at it, and after that was never seen again other than some YouTube cartoons and a brief cameo in Big World Big Adventures in 2018. Now you may be asking yourself, why is DJ making this video? Well, it's because I feel that in terms of the way he was written and the way his lore was laid out by the show and other sources, Vinny is a wasted and confused character that could have been so much cooler. So without further ado, let's talk about it. As I said, Vinny was introduced in the 2016 movie The Great Race as one of the then 13 international characters, that number being increased with the release of Big World Big Adventures. Not to get too off topic, but the international characters were such a cool concept back in 2016, as was The Great Railway Show, only for the showrunners to do almost nothing with most of them throughout the movie, and then develop them in pretty crappy ways throughout Big World Big Adventures, but I digress. We are here to talk about Vinny. Vinny first shows up with the rest of the international crew at Brendam, when their ship docks there by mistake. And as Thomas eventually gets in the way, he bumps Thomas, gets mad, and then proceeds to laugh sinisterly as Thomas almost falls to his death at the rail dock. Cool beans. Later on, at the Great Railway Show, he ends up chasing Philip around after Philip gets in the way, and when Vinny tries to push Philip into a turntable well, Ashima and Thomas hold Vinny back, with the tug-of-war resulting in Vinny crashing into a nearby hydro pole. Oh yeah, and he also presumably wins the strongest engine race, and that's basically all he does in the movie. I want to start out with Vinny's basis because it really is quite fascinating and the most confusing part of all of this. Vinny has got to be one of the most confusing characters in terms of his basis and origins because the show constantly gives us conflicting information to work with. Using the wiki as my main source simply because that's where the most information is compiled in an easily accessible way, it states that Vinny is a Canadian National Railway U4A, of which 5 were built, and even more interestingly, the wiki links his basis listing to a specific Wikipedia article about Canadian National 6400, which is a preserved member of the class built in 1936 that actually has some cool history, apparently having pulled the 1939 Royal Train for King George VI's visit to Canada, and was also an attraction at the New York's World Fair that same year. The locomotive was eventually donated to the Canadian Science and Technology Museum in Ottawa in 1967. And what confuses me about this is that the U4As were built as semi-streamliners, the first streamliners in Canada, and were built by researchers using wind tunnel data to improve smoke clearance around cabs, and they were also intended for passenger service. Vinny, however, is not portrayed as a fast passenger engine. He is portrayed as an engine with brute strength who competes in the strongest engine competition. They also did the same thing to Frida, where she is very clearly a streamliner, but put her in the strength competition for some reason. So Vinny's basis and his personality, as well as kind of what they intended his abilities as a character to be, don't really match. At this point, I'm hesitant to say that Vinny is 6400, which I feel the wiki may be hinting at, but given what I just laid out, I don't think it's the case, nor do I think the showrunners actually intended that. What's really funny, though, is that 6400 did wear royal blue for the 1939 visit, and Vinny also wears royal blue, and it's damn near identical, so maybe they actually were trying to make him 6400. Vinny is also confusing in terms of geography, and that's also why I don't think he's a good candidate for actually being 6400. The show never really nails down where he is actually from. They seem to make a decent case for him being strictly from the States, as that's what his flag is in his Great Race promo, and he has what I believe to be an East Coast accent of some kind, and he's seen in San Francisco in Big World Big Adventures, which makes sense, because why wouldn't he, as an American loco, make these long trips? But what throws me for a loop is that the announcer in the Great Race promo shorts says he's from North America, and given that his basis is a Canadian locomotive, that could also be true. Like, yes, he could frequent both countries, but I don't know why they bothered to say that when, other than his basis, they are very clearly trying to make him American. Yes, I acknowledge that this is very nitpicky, but at the same time, I wish they would have just been consistent instead of giving us all this different information that is either contradictory or just too much. What would have made more sense, in my opinion, would be for Vinny to just be a U4B class, a near identical subclass built for the American Canadian National Railway subsidiary railway Grand Trunk Western. And what's really hilarious about all of this is that there is a U4B that wears Vinny's number, 6407. So he could have easily just been an all-American built U4B, but for whatever reason they had him be a Canadian built U4A that was trying to look like 6400 but wears a U4B number. Ultimately, I wish they just made Vinny's basis simpler. Just pick one basis and location, rather than a weird hybrid of the U4A and B that is also trying to be a real locomotive. If anything, I think they should have just made him an American locomotive that was known for strength, like a big boy or something, I don't know. Okay, why is Vinny a poorly written villain? Well, there are several reasons that all sort of tie into that fact, and that fact is that The Great Race is a mess of a film in many respects. It has the typical Thomas movie problem where the plot is event or something being built is happening on Sodor, and here's what happens, and then everything to varying degrees ties back into said plot. Therefore, Vinny's writing problems can all be linked back to that. I think in general, the international engines should have got more focus instead of Sodor sending 6 engines for whatever reason, and Vinny is of course a part of this too. I also don't really think the story about Thomas learning to accept himself for who he is and wanting to compete in a railway show necessarily needed a villain. Like, yeah, you potentially need someone for Thomas to be jealous of or have a rivalry with, but not a flat-out villain character, and Vinny doesn't even have anything to do with Thomas or hell any of the other competing characters, so he's useless there. The only time Vinny is actually relevant to the plot is when his shenanigans with Philip derail a truck that triggers Thomas's sacrifice victory in the end. A truck which conveniently wasn't a problem until the plot needed it to be, but was supposedly sitting there the entire time. And before you say, oh, but what about when Thomas and Ashima save Philip? Well, other than some action, if you delete that scene, the plot stays exactly the same, so he isn't relevant there either. What makes this all even dumber is the fact that Vinny isn't even the only villain in the movie. Diesel is the villain in the first half of the film, and after Thomas's crash that Diesel effectively causes, the film forgets about Diesel and tries to make Vinny the villain. And that's also why I'm hesitant to call him a secondary villain, because by the time Vinny is prominently featured in the second half, Diesel is gone, making Vinny, by default, the primary villain. What I'm getting at is that the writing in this movie is such a mess that Vinny is either completely irrelevant to the plot, only has relevant when it needs him to, or is just completely misplaced or not utilized properly, i.e. my point about the movie not needing a villain or making him one in the second half. But I do have an idea as to how one could fix all these writing issues, so let's get into that. So I don't really have a concrete story idea for Vinny in terms of making him a better character. I just have a few suggestions that could help. Firstly, as I said, I think he should be either a U4B or, more favorably, an American locomotive known for strength, like Challenger or something. Secondly, I would have him and the other internationals spend time on the island of Sodor. Have the ship dock and leave without them or something, necessitating the engines to stay and use the bridge to get to the mainland. Here we can have some time for Vinny to bully Thomas for his size or something, I don't know. Then throughout the movie, basically have Vinny be a bully character that all the engines deal with and make his comeuppance satisfying. Give us time with him and make us hate him, and please, for the love of all, delete the Diesel subplot and commit to the Vinny subplot and Vinny being the sole villain. Finally, be consistent. Refer to him as being from America, not North America or whatever. Well, there you have it, folks. Vinny's real-life and in-universe history as a villain in Thomas & Friends, as well as why he is a poorly written and conceived character. I probably missed some details, so if there's something you guys know that I don't, let me know. I also had a lot of fun with this one, and would love to do another character breakdown someday, so if you guys want to see that, let me know. Until then, see you all in the next one. Bye, guys!